Ceann Comhairle, for decades, Sister Stan has been a campaigner and advocate for the most marginalised in our society. We could all learn from her, and our thoughts are with her and her family today. I also want to congratulate President-elect Catherine Connolly. She will be a president for all, and she'll be missed in this House, but I think we know that she'll serve with the same integrity, diligence and compassion that she did inside here. The House is on fire. Please answer. This is what a terrified 12-year-old child texted to her mum on Friday after an arson attack on her home, an IPAS centre in Drogheda. In total, 28 people lived in that IPAS centre, the majority of them women and children. 4 children, including a 2-week-old baby, had to be rescued from the top floor of the building. Little children who came to this country seeking sanctuary, now terrified and traumatised and living in fear. Minister, this is where anti-immigrant and racist rhetoric have led us. A violent attack on vulnerable people which could easily have led to children being killed. I want to commend the emergency services in Drogheda for their quick action. I also want to acknowledge that the majority of people in Drogheda and across the country are disgusted by what happened, because this attack is a new low. But is anyone surprised that it's come to this? There have been 30 arson attacks on IPAS centres or proposed centres in recent years. We have witnessed rioting on our streets, and there have been numerous public order incidents at protests outside IPAS centres. And Minister, what has the government's response been to this increasingly volatile atmosphere? To ratchet up its use of inflammatory language and stoke further fears. Mere days after rioting broke out in City West, Simon Harris suggested migration numbers, including the number of people here on work permits, were too high. And then, after the despicable arson attack on Friday night, the government moved immediately to talking about charging those in direct provision for accommodation. You couldn't make it up. Not to mention a callous proposal to reduce accommodation entitlements for people from Ukraine to just 30 days has also just been signed off. Minister, where is the emergency stand-alone meeting on safety concerns for people in international protection? Where is the emergency meeting about increasing levels of violent hate in our communities? And where is the emergency meeting to discuss how to counter the dangerous lies being peddled by far-right agitators online? Ceann Comhairle, this government has failed miserably to deliver on its own commitments on housing and critical public services, but instead of taking responsibility for that, you're now pointing fingers at immigrants, state agencies, and the latest Fall Guy EU red tape. This is straight out of the Farage playbook, and it's deeply concerning the government is taking this approach. The reality is the numbers seeking international protection are way down this year.
Minister to
and people remain trapped in the system for too long because of this government's mismanagement of it.
Minister.
Is the government reflecting on its own communication around this, Minister? And has the security audit of IPAS centres started?
Minister, please.
Okay, I think you heard me respond to Deputy Batchik in the context of the shocking and disgraceful attacks which have happened in Drogheda and in City West. And I'm very clear to anyone listening about the positive contribution that many members of the migrant community make to our country, to our economy, to our society and to our communities. And that is the position of this government and all members of this government in terms of wider integration and migration policy. To your question, the Cabinet Committee considers wider matters, and that's why to the point I raised with Deputy Batchik, we should be able to assess overall migration policy continuously and evaluate it to look at European norms. And Minister Callan is constantly doing that in his engagement with colleagues across the European Union to look at the wider incentives and disincentives and the push and the pull factors. And that's a normal part of migration policy across Europe. And we should be able to have a separate honest evaluation of that continuously, so we're able to manage the overall numbers that are coming into our country. And that's not dismissing the need for migrants and to make their ongoing contribution to our economy, but we need to be able to have an honest debate about that. And I'm clear in my absolute condemnation of what's happened. The Gardaí did an excellent job. There's constant community engagement happening on the ground across many of these centres. If you take the response in City West, in Drogheda, the Gardaí, I think, played an excellent job. And the Taoiseach, the Taoiseach, the Minister for Justice and others were universal in their condemnation with what has happened in these recent attacks. And you didn't say that in your opening remarks. You ignored that in your opening remarks. And you've sought to cloud this issue and trying to conflate everybody in government condemns what happened in Drogheda. And I think well, I think that's very unfair. And what I'm saying is, you know, the government and everyone in this government and everyone in this Parliament should be able to have an overall assessment of migration policy, and that's what I'm saying. And we need an honest debate about that continuously, because there are various factors which contribute to a surge in applications, and we need to be able to evaluate that. So I reject what you've said in trying to conflate these issues. It's unfair. And the work that Minister O'Callaghan is doing is as focused on community engagement through An Garda Síochána and the various supports that we have on the ground as it is the wider issues in terms of migration policy. The attacks have been disgraceful, and I want to reiterate my view that and to acknowledge the ongoing contribution that many people continue to make in our communities across our country. And we value their presence, we value their contribution and their continued work and presence in our country, and they need to feel safe and feel welcomed.
Thank you, Minister.
And we'll be doing everything we can to protect them.
Deputy Cairns.
The government can't stoke fear in one breath, then condemn attacks in another breath, and then actually come in here and seek credit for doing that. Minister, the Social Democrats have been pleading with the government for weeks to moderate your language, to ensure that what you're saying is accurate and the tensions aren't further inflamed, but instead the inflammatory language from government has increased. Shamefully, the Taoiseach chose to amplify half-truths to paint migrants in a negative light. He made those comments fully conscious of the volatile atmosphere that is out there. It's not just irresponsible, it's reprehensible. Now we see rising hate where rising hate naturally leads. A man pouring petrol on the stairs of an IPAS centre in the hopes of burning women and children alive. If this horrific event isn't enough to prompt the government to engage in some reflection, then I don't know what is. The government now has a deliberate strategy of depicting international protection applicants as scammers gaming a lax system.
Thank you, Deputy.
This is not leadership. This is leaning into a toxic far-right narrative. People have a right to come here and to make an application for international protection, and the government has a duty to assess those claims fairly.
To respond,
Minister, will the government show leadership on this issue and deliver that clear and unambiguous message?
Minister to respond. Minister, please.
Look, I reject that completely. I think if you've listened to what I've said, I reject the politics of the far right, of Farage, of anyone who provides an inflammatory response or weaponises this issue to divide people. Our focus is on community, is on building harmony between people and supporting and investing in communities, whilst also ensuring we have a migration system and policy which works. And that's why we should have an ongoing evaluation of it. I think it's unfair to continue to conflate this as you've had. With the experience of the women and the children in that house and the threat that was brought upon them is shocking and is universally condemned by this government. And that's why the work that Minister O'Callaghan is doing in terms of the Gardaí's contact and security reviews which happen for IPAS centres is really important. It's why community engagement is centrally important. And I'm disgusted, as everyone is, with what has happened. And I know even over the summer, some of the attacks on certain members of the Indian community as well, there was fear, I know in my community in West Dublin, amongst many of the migrant members of our community. And we need to again reinforce to them the need to support them and promote safety in all aspects of our response.
Deputy
And community is at the centre of that.